Okay, imagine this. You're maybe buying some land in Germany, thinking about building a house.
Or maybe just gardening, digging a flower bed.
Right, exactly. And your shovel hits something. Something hard.
Not a rock.
Not a rock, not old pipes. It's a bomb, an actual bomb from World War II, 80 years old. Sounds wild, right?
But it's surprisingly common over there. A really persistent issue.
A direct legacy, you mean, from the Allied bombing?
Yeah, millions of tons of bombs were dropped.
Yeah.
And, a lot of them just didn't go off. They're still down there.
And that's exactly what we're going to dig into today. We've got this stack of sources, forum posts, news reports, expert analysis, all sorts.
A real mix.
And our mission really is to pull it all together for you, to understand how common this still is, how dangerous, and, well, how tangled up it is with everyday life in Germany.
It really shows how history isn't just, in the past. It's literally underfoot.
So let's start with that big question from one of the online threads. Are bomb evacuations actually common in Germany? What's the verdict?
Well, it seems to really depend on where you are. The responses showed a big difference geographically.
Okay.
If you're in a small village, maybe somewhere rural, that wasn't a big target back then, you might never see an evacuation your whole life.
But the cities are different.
Oh, yeah. Totally different story. People in major cities talked about being evacuated multiple times. It's almost normal for them.
Which cities came up most often?
Places like Cologne, the whole Ruhr area, Essen, Dortmund, Duisburg, Frankfurt, definitely, Kassel, Berlin, even cities like Leipzig and Dresden out east, areas that got hit hard.
And the numbers, they back this up, right? The scale of it.
They really do. Sources say something like 2,000 tons of unexploded ordnance are found every year.
2,000 tons annually.
Annually, across Germany.
Yeah.
And just think about Berlin. Between 1947 and 2018, they defused 1.8 million pieces of ordnance there.
Wow, 1.8 million.
Yeah, so we're talking thousands of bombs, shells, grenades found every single year. It tells you this isn't some rare freak event.
That's staggering. So how do people usually find them? Is it always big construction sites?
Often, yeah. Big building projects, digging foundations, road work. That deep digging disturbs the ground for the first time in decades.
Makes sense.
But not always. Sources mention smaller digs, too, like putting up fences or even farmers just plowing their fields and hitting something.
And there was that saying people mentioned online, something like, "You're not a true German if you haven't been evacuated."
Right. Maybe not literally true for everyone, but it shows how much it's part of the public consciousness, especially in cities. It just happens.
Okay, so it's definitely common. But the part that surprised me digging into this was why they're still so dangerous after 80 years. You'd think they'd just fizzle out.
That's a really logical thought, but unfortunately it's wrong. The science is pretty clear in the reports. The explosives themselves, like Amatol and TNT, incredibly stable stuff.
So they don't degrade?
Nope. The explosive charge doesn't lose its punch over time, still potent.
So the bang is still there, but why more dangerous now? That seems counterintuitive.
Right, and that's the key. The explosive is stable, but the metal casing around it isn't. It's been sitting in the ground, exposed to moisture, soil chemicals.
Corroding.
Exactly. Corroding for decades. And as that metal shell weakens, the explosive core can get exposed. More importantly, the firing mechanisms, the fuses, they become extremely unstable.
Yeah.
Really sensitive.
Okay, so it's the rusty shell and the dodgy fuse that's the problem, not the explosive itself getting old, so even a small knock.
Precisely. A vibration from nearby construction, an excavator bumping it, even drilling, can be enough to set it off. And sadly, this isn't just theory. The sources list some awful incidents.
Yeah, it's not just the big aerial bombs either, is it?
No, definitely not. You've got unexploded artillery shells, grenades, especially around old battlefields or training areas like near Berlin. And then there's the whole issue of stuff dumped at sea.
Like the phosphorus.
Yeah, phosphorus washing up on beaches, particularly the North Sea and Baltic coasts. People mistake it for amber, apparently.
Oh, no.
Yeah, they pick it up, it dries out, or gets warm in their pocket, and it can just burst into flames. Nasty burns.
That's terrifying. And the actual bomb accidents, some were really tragic.
Absolutely heartbreaking. The sources mentioned 3 people killed on a Berlin building site back in '94. 3 bomb disposal experts died in Göttingen in 2010 during a defusal attempt.
God.
A construction worker killed in Euskirchen in 2014. More recently, Munich, 2021. 4 people injured when one went off during construction work. And that's not just Germany. The UK had issues in Exeter, Kingston. There's that trawler off Norfolk that hit one. Crew injured, boat badly damaged. It's a live threat.
So when they find one, especially a big one in a city, the first thing that happens is disruption, mass evacuations.
That's the immediate result. The
Right.
scale can vary. A small shell in the woods might just mean a couple 100 meters cleared.
But a big city bomb.
Yeah, half-ton or one-ton bomb. The evacuation zones can be huge. We're talking tens of thousands of people moved out.
The numbers we saw were just mind-boggling. Frankfurt, 70,000 people in 2017.
Yeah, and Augsburg in 2016, 54,000. Hanover, 50,000 the next year.
And it's not like these are isolated incidents. You see multiple big ones every year. Frankfurt had another one, 26,000 people in 2018. Berlin seems to have them constantly, 12,000, 15,000 people at a time.
Ludwigshafen, Dortmund, Flensburg, Darmstadt. The list just goes on. It happens all over.
And these huge zones are purely for safety while the experts work.
Absolutely. It gives the EOD teams, the explosive ordnance disposal experts, the space they need. Their first choice is always to disarm it safely.
But sometimes they can't.
Right. If it's too unstable, too risky to move or defuse, they have to do a controlled detonation right there. And that requires an even bigger safety zone because, well, you're setting off a bomb.
And the ripple effects.
Yeah.
Traffic jams, people can't get home, businesses closed. You mentioned hospitals even getting evacuated, like in Bonn.
Yeah, imagine that logistical nightmare. It just shows how this piece of history still deeply impacts modern life, urban planning, everything.
So who are the people actually dealing with these things? Germany must have specialist teams.
They absolutely do. Each state has its own Kampfmittelbeseitigungsdienst, the KMBD. Basically, highly trained EOD units. These are the pros who handle locating, assessing, and making safe all this old ordnance.
And they're not just bigging randomly, right? They use specific techniques.
Right, it's quite sophisticated. A really important tool is analyzing old Allied aerial photos from the war.
Photos taken during the raids.
During and right after. Groups like the ACIU Allied Central Interpretation Unit took millions. And pioneers, like a guy named Hans-Georg Karls, worked out how to read these photos. They looked for tiny clues, disturbed earth, odd shadows, crater patterns to make these result maps, or Ergebniskarte.
Maps showing likely bomb locations.
Exactly. They pinpoint areas with a high probability of UXO unexploded ordnance. They're not perfect, of course. Sometimes shadows or debris obscured things.
Okay, so the EOD teams use these maps, maybe ground-penetrating radar too.
Yes, various survey methods. Once they find something suspicious, they investigate.
And then, what's the procedure?
First, assess its condition. Is it stable? Can it be moved? The best outcome, the preferred method, is always to defuse it. Make it safe without an explosion.
But as we said, with the corrosion and unstable fuses, that's not always on the table.
Precisely. If it's too dodgy, too degraded, maybe the fuse mechanism is too damaged or complex, a controlled detonation on-site is the only safe option left.
Which explains those huge evacuations we talked about, like that one in Munich that exploded during the work. Maybe it was already deemed too unstable.
Very possibly. That's why many big construction firms now do extensive surveys before they even start digging, using these historical maps and modern tech, trying to find them before they become a surprise danger.
It's already such a huge issue, but some of the sources highlighted even more specific, unique challenges, things that really stick with you.
Yeah, that story from Rheinberg just outside Berlin, that was
It
incredible.
was a major target, right? Railways, factories.
Huge target. Rail yards, an aircraft plant, chemical factories.
Yeah.
There were even rumors some were involved in Nazi nuclear research, working with enriched uranium.
And the Allies used a particular type of bomb there, with time delays.
Exactly. Especially in one massive raid, March 15th, 1945. They dropped a lot of bombs with chemical time delay fuses, the M124, M125 types.
How did those work?
They had acetone inside that slowly dissolved celluloid discs. The idea was the bomb would go off hours, maybe even days later, purely to cause chaos and fear long after the raid ended.
Nasty stuff.
What made Oranienburg unique and so dangerous even now is that almost all the bombs in that specific raid used these fuses. Usually, it was just a small percentage.
And that Paul Dietrich story really brought it home.
Yeah, his house just destroyed by one of these bombs. 70 years after it was dropped, it finally went off.
70 years.
Can you imagine? Your house just vanishes because of a bomb dropped before you were even born. And the sources mentioned he got hardly any compensation. Something about a technical rule, only paying for damage from German ordnance. Seems incredibly harsh.
And the craziest part, after his house was gone.
Unbelievable. He found 2 more unexploded American bombs in his own yard.
2 more.
It just shows the sheer density of unexploded ordnance, that's the term, in heavily bombed places like Oranienburg. Living there is just living with that constant risk.
Right. UXO. Good term. So Oringenberg is still dealing with that specific time fuse problem.
Constantly. Ongoing, dangerous clearance work. Decades later.
And then there was that other specific problem area, Wittstock, the old military training ground. That's about cluster munitions, right? CMR.
Correct. Cluster munition remnants. That's a whole different category under international treaties, like the Convention on Cluster Munitions.
Yeah.
And Germany's having a really tough time clearing that site.
They missed a deadline.
Yeah, their original 2020 deadline. They had to ask for 5 more years until 2025. And this is even with a plan, a budget of around, 67 million euros estimated?
So why is Wittstock so hard to clean up?
It's a combination of things. Really thick vegetation, for one. They use controlled burns to clear it, but you can only do that a few days a year when the weather's right.
Okay.
But the bigger problem is, the site is also littered with other kinds of UXO. Regular bombs, artillery shells, grenades, all mixed in with the cluster bomblets.
And that stops them using machines.
Exactly. It's too dangerous. You can't use the faster survey gear or mechanical clearance stuff, so it all has to be done manually. Super slow, painstaking work, often in tiny 50 by 50 meter squares, inch by inch.
Wow.
Plus, there's a shortage of the specially licensed deminers you need for that kind of tricky manual work. And apparently, German law stops them from bringing in international contractors or NGOs who might have the capacity to speed things up.
So they're making progress, clearing a square kilometer here and there, but hitting major roadblocks to meet even the extended deadline.
Yeah, it's a really complex knot to untangle. Shows how these international commitments clash with very difficult, dangerous facts on the ground.
So when you pull all these threads together, the stats, the danger, these specific stories from Oranienburg and Wittstock, the EOD teams.
What really emerges is that World War II isn't just history in Germany. It's still physically present, a continuous, costly, and dangerous reality they're dealing with every day.
Yeah, it demands constant attention, huge amounts of money, specialized skills. 80 years later.
It's literally part of the landscape, dictating where you can build, how you dig, adding a layer of risk most places don't face.
It's more than just cleaning up. It feels like a constant societal effort, a reminder.
Definitely. A long shadow from the past.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? What does it really mean for a society to still be dealing with the physical fallout of a war 8 decades on? And it makes you wonder, what other hidden legacies of history might be shaping our lives in ways we don't even see? Something to mull over.